Good afternoon. Today is Friday, the 30th of January, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Patrick Henningsen with me in the studio.
Great to be with you, Brian.
Yes, excellent. And we're also very pleased to have Basil Valentine, journalist and political analyst with us. So welcome, Basil. Well, the talk really across mainstream media in UK today, various levels, is the tourist, what's his name, Patrick? Keir Starmer, that's it, Keir Starmer, has been off on his travels visiting China. And we're definitely going to make some comment on that. We're going to have a look at the serious build-up towards war with Iran. We're going to have an in-depth look into British UK politics and who the real actors are controlling not only what's happening in the civil service, but what's happening at Prime Minister level. And in addition, we're going to have another look at the Panopticon for UK, which is the new police service. So over to you, Patrick, Mr. Starmer.
Well, it's the state visit in China. We'll bring this up on screen right now. And this was a great summit for Britain, but not quite to the level of a welcome that the American and the French presidents got, but nonetheless, serious talks happened there. And what was interesting about this now is China is really taking this center stage as a sort of leading power now in this vacuum that Trump has left after Davos. President Xi Jinping warned Keir Starmer about unilateralism, protectionism, and power politics destabilizing the international order. And he's saying that international law can only function when all nations, especially the big powers, adhere to it. He's really, that's a dog whistle towards Donald Trump, but with Starmer sitting right across from him. And this is what he said, which I think was quite important in this context. If great powers don't lead by example, the world risks sliding back into the law of the jungle, says Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, taking a leadership role in terms of the global geopolitical scene, Brian.
Well, we need some gravitas, don't we? Because the rest of it is degenerating into pure theatre. But I'm just going to say, I hear that Starmer's place at the big table was fairly low down the pecking order. So I don't think he was getting quite the official reception from the Chinese that he thought he was. But maybe that's a little bit of hearsay.
Nor did they close down the Forbidden City for him like they did for Trump and Emmanuel Macron. But more about that maybe later. But over now, let's just talk about the degeneracy, if you will, of the international system here. Iran, Trump's latest war. All of the naval assets, which we'll show in a minute. Brian, I know you have a lot to comment on this side, but the U.S. has amassed a massive military force there. But here is the basis of the public consent, getting the Western public to buy into this war. Trump has changed basically the excuse for it. He's pivoted away from the protests of a few weeks ago. Now he's saying it's about the nuclear program, and maybe he'll pivot in a few days to something else, the missiles or something. So it's hard to know where Trump is or what the reason for this war is. But back here, Brian, real quickly, the dirty numbers game, excellent piece in the Cradle. And we'll look at this. So this is what people have heard in Western media. Waves of coverage. And they're talking about 43,000 dead, 350,000 wounded. And where are all these claims coming from about the massacres, alleged massacres in Iran? Well, one of them is the International Center for Human Rights. They're based in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. No forensic data, no independent verifiable proof, no photos, nothing. There's a few photos circulating with body bags, but we'll talk about the details of those maybe in a minute. But a 900-word blog post by a British comedian set the mainstream media ablaze with those claims here, Brian. And the lowest estimate here from the human rights activists in Iran, again, I think this one's based in New York, funded by the State Department, they've lowered it down now to 5,848, this particular NGO. And that's the National Endowment for Democracy, a CIA cutout. But what's important here is this, Brian. All these claims get filtered up to mainstream media. So Time Magazine is using this 30,000 dead have been killed by the regime, supposedly. Again, unverifiable. citing Iran International. This is an Israeli clearinghouse. It's not in Iran. It's an Israeli cutout, if you will. That's acknowledged even by Israeli intelligence. On record, 36,000 deaths. So it's really all over the place. And Amnesty International was pressured, but refrained giving specific numbers and just said thousands here. But here is the actual official figures. This is from the Iranian government's Foundation of Martyrs and Veteran Affairs, 3,117 deaths, including 2,400 civilians. That includes also rioters and security personnel, hundreds of police. There was a state funeral for the police that were killed. There were, to our count, 250 mosques were set on fire. 700 banks were attacked and set on fire. So this was a calculated attack that both U.S. and Israeli intelligence admit that they were involved in the destabilization. And yet in the West, Brian, it's, the regime is carrying out a genocide. It's just, so that's the rhetoric that's being used to sell this war.
Yeah, it really is terrible to watch this happening, that the West is inflaming a state. On one hand, it's saying that these terrible atrocities are going on. Clearly, some atrocities have happened, but the West is saying these terrible atrocities have happened. We're going to solve the problem by bombing Iran. That's effectively the American stance at the moment. And I want to say to our audience that we've had some very interesting emails come in from British Iranians who are commenting on what they've heard that's happening in the country from relatives. Clearly some really unpleasant things have happened, but our key point here is that the West is not reporting events accurately. They're being grossly inflamed in order to help justify a possible forthcoming attack by the Americans. And if we're going to deal with a proper international politics, then we've got to have truth from both the Western media and other media overseas. So we recognise the blight of some Iranians at the moment, but the big point here is that the destabilization is clearly orientated by the West.
And these figures are being pulled out of thin air, literally. So they're not. It's not forensic.
It's emotion, true. Isn't it? These are for emotion and propaganda purposes.
The same in Syria, Brian. Say Assad butchered 500,000 of his own people. On those figures, they were counting dead Syrian army soldiers and Al-Qaeda soldiers. So basically, anybody that died within Syria went into this giant body count that was used to justify sanctions and bombing of Syria. Exact same formula here with Iran. Yeah. No different. So the lies just get unbelievable in our mainstream media. And I want to give a shout out to Jonathan Cook, one of the greatest independent journalists, I think, in the country, in Britain, the BBC, pushing the case for an illegal war on Iran with even bigger lies than Trump's. So the BBC have out-Trumped Trump somehow, Brian. Now, we're going to show you a BBC clip here. And there's nothing journalistic about this report. It is pure propaganda. The Chinese and the Russians have nothing on the beeb when it comes to ramping up excitement and fear for a war. Watch this.
They killed my brother, the woman screams. We still don't know the exact toll, but Iranians who witnessed what happened believe tens of thousands are dead, many more seriously injured.
The scale is truly shocking, and it's not just a turning point in the history of the Iranian people. I would say in contemporary history, it qualifies as one of the worst mass killings. It is absolutely essential, to the extent possible, to get at the truth, to collect the evidence.
As Washington weighs up what to do next, one of the American military's largest aircraft carriers, with up to 50 fighter jets on board, has arrived in the region. The US has bases around the Middle East, which have now been significantly reinforced. And this morning, a new warning from President Trump. A massive armada is heading to Iran, he said. Hopefully, Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate, warning that if it doesn't, the next attack on Iran will be far worse. Last June, US bombers joined Israel's attack on the country, hitting 3 sites central.
So that's basically the report, Brian, there. And just, we'll move on. But anonymous voices, maybe tens of thousands are dead, and outside Western person saying that it's impossible to get the evidence, but we're sure that tens of thousands.
We are sure, yes.
So it's classic double speak. Incredible. That's what's being used to sell this to the Western public.
Yeah. And Trump, of course, has been announcing that he's moving forces.
He's saying there's a massive armada heading towards Iran. Iran better make a deal or we're going to bomb you. Basically, this is diplomacy from the U.S. Brian, this is like a child wrote this tweet. It is embarrassing. It makes no sense. It's incoherent. It's inconsistent. I don't know what to say.
Well, it seems to be how politics is done these days over X. But just to add a little bit of meat to this, of course, the forces that are being moved by the US, vast, powerful forces, all based around the very big carriers. But America is under a huge amount of pressure at the moment. If we have a look at this map of the world, and we can have a look at US carrier deployments. Now, at the moment, they've got the USS George Washington is doing operations with the Japanese, apparently. So the key part is that the USS Abraham Lincoln has been moved out of the South China Sea and up in order to deal with the Iranian crisis. But if you have a look at over here, we've got another big carrier, the US Theodore Roosevelt. That is finishing maintenance, but isn't ready at the moment to become fully operational. And we've got beg your pardon, let's just jump back on that, sorry. And we have down off South America, we've got the USS Gerald R. Ford. So these carriers are basically locked into operations down there in South America and in the United States itself. So Abraham Lincoln has had to be pulled away from operations on the Chinese coast. Normally, the Americans have got a carrier operating fairly close to China, although they're becoming increasingly nervous of the capability of Chinese missile systems, in particularly land-based missiles capable of targeting the carrier. And so it's very significant that in order to deal with Iran, America has had to pull a key asset away from China. And I'll just add that I believe that this particular ship, the USS Tripoli, I think I've got that name correct, has effectively taken station to replace the carrier that's disappeared from the South China Sea. So huge number of assets, of course, in the American Navy. Cost of this, Patrick, mind-blowing to move these battle groups around. But yes, Trump is clearly serious in the quantity and power of the assets that he's moved to deal with Iran.
No, and the cost, Brian, they announced that the U.S. military budget, Trump was very proud to announce that it has been ballooned up to $1.5 trillion per year. What happened to Doge and balancing the deficit and all that talk at the beginning?
It doesn't matter if there's a potential war. If there's a potential war, the money appears on a plate, Patrick.
Well, it's not cost-free. And what we're seeing this week should really shock people what's going on. And here is Richard Wolff, the noted economist from America. He's saying here, foreign central banks hold more gold than treasuries now. What does this mean, Brian? That gold is now the new reserve currency, no longer the U.S. dollar. That's official, folks. USSR's decline left the U.S. empire to reach its peak. World Central Bank then exchanged back then, Brian, gold for U.S. treasuries. As the U.S. empire declines right now after 2000, as China rises, those banks are shifting back from U.S. treasuries to gold. Look at the graph. It is unbelievable. So the inverse relationship here between U.S. treasuries and gold, and we'll go on. More on this here. Gold is the new reserve currency, says Mike Adams here, quoting, look at this. Gold has overtaken treasuries and central bank foreign currency reserves. This all happened, Brian, within the last week.
Yes, it's momentous events.
This is a massive run on the dollar. Look at this. The official gold holdings at market price up $5 trillion, surpassing foreign official treasury holdings of $3.9 trillion. This happened in the blink of an eye. We have never seen this in our lifetimes.
It's very significant.
This is unbelievable, and the ramifications are going to be significant. Here's Peter Schiff right now. I think Euro Pacific Capital is his company. Listen to what he has to say.
And the world is now pulling the rug out from under the U.S. The dollar is going to collapse. The dollar is going to be replaced by gold. Central banks are buying gold to back up their currencies. They're getting rid of dollars. They're getting rid of treasuries. We are headed for an economic crisis, again, that will make the 2008 financial crisis look like a Sunday school picnic. The biggest difference between the crisis that we're about to have and the one we had back then is this one is all in America. It's not going to be exported to the rest of the world. It's not a global financial crisis. It's an American financial crisis.
So it will affect Britain. It remains to be seen what the city will do with its massive dollar holdings and also the European central banks as well. So what's Donald Trump's reaction to this crisis? He says the dollar's doing great. This is what he said. The dollar's doing fantastic. Here's what he said about the housing market. And Brian, I've never heard anything this insane in my entire life from any political leader. Listen to President Trump here.
Existing housing, people that own their homes, we're going to keep them wealthy. We're going to keep those prices up. We're not going to destroy the value of their homes so that somebody that didn't work very hard can buy a home. We're going to make it easier to buy. We're going to get interest rates down. But I want to protect the people that for the first time in their lives feel good about themselves. They feel like that they're wealthy people. And I want them to understand it. There's so much talk about, we're going to drive housing prices down. I don't want to drive housing prices down. I want to drive housing prices up for people that own their homes. And they can be assured that's what's going to happen.
Well, some interesting comment there. What's your take?
What about the people who don't own homes, Brian? They're not going to be able to afford homes. So what does this mean? And we'll bring this up on screen. This was sent to us by one of our viewers here. Imagine working 9 to 5 for 50 years, and then the Fed prints 40% of the total money supply and inflates away 20 years of your hard work. This, my friends, is government inflation. That's where it comes from. And the result of this, Brian, the numbers don't lie. Trump's working class votes, according to recent polls, they're gone. They've been totally eviscerated here. His approval rating, look at that, disapproval rating, 61%. So he's really not looking after the working class that put him into power. And the poll numbers are devastating. Basil Valentine, I want to bring you in. Basil, what do you think about the situation and what you just heard from the president?
Hi, Patrick. Great to be with you. Well, it's been the case on both sides of the Atlantic for the last 30 or 40 years that people have effectively been bribed by their own governments with their own money, and rising house prices have been absolutely central to that. But we're now, as you point out, in a situation where young professionals with degrees and well-paying jobs can't possibly buy a house. 40 years ago, mortgages were calculated on 3 times annual salary. That's now up to 8 or 9 times. Of course, in America, they've got a lot more land to build houses, and house prices in America have also traditionally been a lot more volatile. In the troughs, the prices go much, much lower. But in the UK, they're much more stable. There's been no meaningful drop in property prices in my entire lifetime. The UK, of course, now embarking on this huge house building program, much of it on the green belt. I think that's an absolute disaster. But in the US, well, they obviously have a homelessness problem many times that of Great Britain. 60, 70, 80,000 people homeless in the greater Los Angeles area alone. And Donald Trump doesn't seem to be remotely interested in doing anything about that.
It's pretty shocking, and it's all true. And what's the reaction from Trump to save the dollar here? Let's bring this up on screen. Who's this gentleman here? This is really going to be the knockout punch, ladies and gentlemen. If you think Donald Trump is fighting the globalists, well, this gentleman, Trump is preparing to nominate Kevin Warsh, the son-in-law of Ronald Lauder, the billionaire who happens to be, just by coincidence, president of the World Jewish Congress, but that's by and the by. And he's a former steering committee member of the Bilderberg Group to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. So all of this talk by people like Alex Jones and everybody that Trump is fighting the globalists, it seems like Trump is the face of the globalists at the moment. It's hard to argue against that, but incredible.
It's pretty incredible. Is he there to protect? Trump there to protect America, or is he bringing it down? Have you got a bit more on this particular?
No, that's all we have there. We'll leave it there. We'll leave it there.
Okay. Well, let's come into to UK and have a look at what's going on in UK. And one of the key things that UK Column News has been talking about is people talking about broken Britain as though it's some sort of accident. We are incompetent. We don't know how to run a country. We don't know how to run industry. The country is falling apart. And we're getting constant reports in the press. More recently, of course, the press is winding up to the fact that a lot of people who would vote for reform believe Britain is fundamentally broken, and that we've got the use of the word chaos. It's chaos, readers, on Britain's broken political system. But the key question that we should keep in our minds is, has Britain just broken up because we're incompetent and stupid, or is this country being deliberately broken from the inside? And that's what we believe has been going on. But I'll just bring this New Statesman quote up here, because many people, they refuse to believe that there can be nasty things going on in the world. It's always a cock-up rather than a conspiracy. And the reporter here from the New Statesman saying they were wrong about broken Britain. But in the actual a little quote from inside this article, there was something very significant, I thought. So the reporter said, Britain can feel divided and lost, but there's always another side to the story. If all politics is local, as the old saying goes, then perhaps all hope is too. I don't really believe that this reporter knew the significance of what they were talking about, but local politics, the key to stopping what's happening, because when people locally, the ordinary man and woman in the street, say no to these rules-based international order policies, that's when they stop. So there was some good punch in that New Statesman article, even though the rest of it was fairly lackluster. And then, of course, we have Nigel Farage. He is coming under the spotlight now from a lot of people, and turbulent times here with the journalist Richard North, a very, very good look into Farage and what he's really up to. So is Farage going to do a mini Trump in UK?
Or a Boris Part 2? Or
a Boris Part 2, quite possibly. And we've got to be very discerning to see that he stays on the right path to actually tackle the global elite. But let's just move on and have a look at how the Labour Party said it was going to deal with things. This is part of their Labour manifesto. We've shown this before. We just look at about 30 seconds to remind ourselves of the style that Labour Party came across as it moved into power.
This cost of living crisis comes on the back of decades of high inequality and low growth.
Now, the number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment has risen to a new record high.
Rishi Sunak gave a speech rolling back on the government's net zero pledges.
The rising cost of mortgages is causing misery across the country.
The record-breaking week for numbers crossing the channel this year so far.
So there we are. It's all black and white. It's all dismal. It's all due to Rishi. Well, maybe not when we look deeper. Now, we're going to move from that, what was promised and what Labour said it was going to do in government, to another look at just part. We'll just look at probably a minute of the Institute of Government talking about changes inside the state. And remember, this is an unelected body calmly telling its audience what is going to take place in British politics.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction, and welcome everyone here today. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to say a few words to introduce Darren Jones MP, Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Unsurprisingly to any of you here, the Institute for Government agrees that government must think hard about the how as well as about the what. Without setting up the people, institutions and processes of government for success, no government is going to deliver for the voters. And that's why we were really pleased to see the creation of the Chief Secretary role at the centre of government and to learn about the decisions to clarify the structures there and to hear about the government's plans to make it easier for the public to access public services using digital tools, something that What Three Words knows all.
Well, that's enough of that, but you get the general idea. Totally unelected, standing the lectern and calmly describing what they, unelected people, have recommended for the politics of UK. And if you follow the track record of the Institute of Government, invariably what they suggest then comes into being. Let's have a look at another segment where one of their staff members, a lady, starts to look in more detail at aspects of the government and in particular the civil service.
My name is Alex Thomas. I'm an executive director here at the IFG. And this panel, we're going to be talking about rewiring the state. Is the government making any progress? We're going to kick off with a presentation from my colleague Hannah Keenan, who will talk about our brilliant Whitehall Monitor, which the 13th edition of which we launched this morning.
Thanks very much, Alex. So as Alex says, this is the 13th edition of Whitehall Monitor. This year's report looks at how the civil service changed in 2025, a year that was all about rewiring, and our recommendations for 2026. I will start with a very brief bit of context. Starmer has had to deal with 11 resignations. That is the second highest number of any recent Prime Minister at this point in their tenure. We have found that over half of departments have a new permanent secretary in place since the general election. The civil service continued to grow in 2025. You'll see that growth is slightly slower than in previous years, but we still saw an additional 5,000 or so people join in the last year. When you look on a proportional basis, however, it is the digital and data and the policy professions that continue to grow the fastest. Both of those professions have over doubled since 2016, and they continued to grow the fastest in 2025. The civil service also continues to become more senior, and you can see just how much the grade distribution has shifted here since 2010. Part of that is down to automation, meaning that there are fewer roles at the most junior grades. That pay restraint hasn't gone away, but pay is recovering from quite deep real terms cuts, particularly so at the junior grades. For the senior civil service, real terms pay is still 24% below what it was in 2010. So those recent rises, we think, will alleviate some of the pressure to move roles and to seek promotion, but until the way that pay is actually structured has changed, those incentives will still remain. On morale, the latest data that we have is for 2024, where we saw a very small uptick following 3 years of consecutive decline.
So there we are. Obviously, that was little excerpts out of what she actually commented upon. But what you've got is a huge civil service, which is now not really under the control of the government, is under the control of other agencies. The digital proportion of the civil service greatly expanding. And then we are getting rid of or already lost the lower paid jobs because AI is taking that over. And what this lady is giving you a look into is the workings of the civil service. And later in the news, we're going to be hearing that really nobody knows how this organisation functions. But what we can be sure of, very powerful global corporate interests fully embedded in the civil service, particularly in relation to this digitalisation and the creation of a digital-based economy and country, never put forward in a manifesto, never talked about properly on the floor of the House, never discussed in committees, but this is what's driving the government.
Not just rewiring, Mike, a full-on renovation of the architecture of government.
It's a complete restructuring.
With a giant elite managerial class on top of the AI, but no entry-level or lower jobs. Those have been swallowed up.
Those are already gone.
They're gone by AI.
Yeah.
Basil Valentine, we just have a minute left, but what's your reaction to what you've just heard, Basil?
Well, no democratic oversight either, who actually is in charge of the civil service. From those numbers, it looks like it's becoming increasingly top-heavy, and that trend will only increase because it's the mundane clerical work that AI replaces so quickly and so efficiently. One forecast, we'll come on to this later, shows up to 40% of entry-level software jobs, for example, are set to disappear with AI.
No, it's absolutely extraordinary. And Brian, one of the big, paradigm shifts that we're going to see in society, and Basil also has been following this story, and I absolutely want to get his comment on this. We'll bring this up on screen at the moment here. Universal basic income could be used to soften the hit from AI job losses in the UK, minister says. So this is Lord Stockwood opining here on this dystopian future that we are basically facing right now. The UK could introduce UBI, Universal Basic Income, to protect workers in industries that are being disrupted by AI, says Investment Minister Jason Stockwood here. Undoubtedly, we're going to have to think really carefully about how we soft land those industries that go away. Industries that go away, Brian. So they're really preparing here for something I don't think people are ready for. Morgan Stanley said UK was losing more jobs than it is creating because of AI. So because of AI, we're in the negative. Yeah. So what's their solution? Pay people to stay at home? I'm not sure.
And create more AI.
And create more AI. So who's going to pay for all that? Is that deficit spending? Basil, I want to get your comments on this, because this is something we've all talked about. The natural product of a roboticized, AI-driven economy is going to be having to put millions of people on universal basic income. Go ahead, Basil.
Well, the forecast is as many as 8 million jobs could be at risk from AI, but I think that's the low end of the spectrum, because we're already now used to digital interfaces in McDonald's, now in Tesco's cafes as well, staff cuts left, right, and center. What do we do with all these people? Well, the idea of UBI, according to Lord Stockwood, is that it'll give an opportunity for people to retrain, that they're not going to be paid just to sit around and fester at home. But is coercion therefore going to be involved? And in which case, what difference is there between universal credit and universal basic income? Universal basic income, the universal suggests, is that everybody gets paid it, regardless of whether or not you have anything worthwhile to do every day or not. But it looks like they'll end up fudging some sort of glorified universal credit system, and forcing training on people. Quite what jobs people are going to retrain for, I'm not sure. If 8 million jobs are going to be lost, what are we going to be all retrained to do? Of course, the whole point of AI is it's wealth creation. So therefore, why not tax the wealth that AI is creating and redistributed to people who've been put out of work as a result? And then that loops back to the argument about tech companies not being based in the UK, and they will take their business elsewhere, and all the other so-called roadblocks towards wealth taxes. So it's a bit of a bind, really. The projected cost has been estimated to be as high as £200 billion, or possibly as low as £50 billion. But whatever it is, it's a huge amount. Rather amusingly, there is a trial scheme being run with people being paid £1,600 a month by the government. And the idea is to find out how that affects their lives. I think most people will say very positively if the government decide to give you 1,600 quid a month every month tax-free, and then turn around and say, oh, now, how's that impacted your life? I think you'll likely say, well, yeah, great. I've been on holiday and bought some new clothes and a new TV. I mean, what a stupid question.
Yeah, it's Basil, it sums it up. Everything that we are seeing about the so-called experts who are restructuring government is that their mindset is truly unbelievable. They are following through on ideas and policies which don't seem to have any basis of common sense attached to them. They're in a mindset where they're using the words and the phrases, and this is what's got to happen. But if you say, well, what does this actually do for the quality of people's life? It's like that's irrelevant. But was it £1,600 a month? That's probably pocket money for the average MP for his, I don't know what, dog expenses probably.
Fruit and flowers and drinks tabs. But Brian, this is the problem. It's not just rewiring government. They're not telling you this. It's rewiring society. It's rewiring your relationship with the state. This is a full overhaul of, I would even say Western civilization in the modern sense that we have, developed over the last 200 years. There's no public debate about this. There's no discussion. There's no forum. And this is fundamentally going to change the lives of the next how many generations?
Well, if they get their way, it will never change because people will never be able to escape from the panopticon.
We'll get to that panopticon in a minute.
It was there in my mind, yes.
And Basil, final comment. We got a couple seconds left. Round this out, and then I want to bring in the Palantir graphic here. But go ahead, Basil.
Well, the irony of this universal basic income trial is that one of the selected areas is Jarrow, from where, of course, in 1936 there was the famous Jarrow March, the unemployed marching all the way to London, demanding jobs. As Brian says, it hasn't really been thought through at this point, but it's part of, as you both pointed out, really the world of our parents, my parents, the non-digital world that they lived in is fast disappearing, and there are so many fronts now on which I think people feel it, on which there's a kind of fundamentally different way that society is being steered, including redefining relationships between the individual and the state and the role of artificial intelligence, digital technology in that. I mean, my mother, for example, never went online in her entire life. That generation are dying out. Will it even be possible to do that and live in society as an effective actor in the future? Really, we should be able to.
We should have that choice, at least in a free country, if we are indeed free. But bring this up on screen here. This is a great presentation here. We'll give credit to the Nerve News here. But look at this. These are the different government departments here connected with Palantir, the American-based AI company here, Brian. Look at, they're touching everything there. Ministry of Defense, $382 million, GCHQ, unknown, NHS, of course, and DEFRA, Home Office. It's right there. And so that's a U.S. company using probably Amazon Web Servers, another U.S. company to host the cloud computing.
Buried into the UK with absolutely no accountability. The public are just told it's happening, but we're not to know what's really going on here. But one thing we can be sure about is that the shareholders stripping all the wealth out of UK to wherever that company chooses to be based in order to escape the most taxes as possible.
And here's the grand poobah of this technocracy, Peter Thiel. And look at this. I mean, the numbers here are just staggering, Brian. You would say this is basically a corporate takeover of the British state. If you want to look at this, to decouple from this, it's impossible. It would take years. Once you are hooked up to this system, it's very hard to migrate,
pull back
and migrate data. And we're told that is Palantir's business model. It's to get people stuck and hooked into it. And that's basically a strategy for achieving long-term, quote, clients for this ever-growing artificial intelligence leviathan.
Yes.
It's frightening here.
And I'll just add, Patrick, that in some of the Institute of Government clips that I've listened to, they're calmly suggesting that more committees should allow in corporate interest to sit alongside elected members in order to be making decisions. But for the public, absolutely no knowledge of who these people are or a chain of accountability responsibility and accountability.
And also, these same tech barons, Brian, are plowing huge sums of money into British politics. Do you think they want something in return for that investment? They're funding podcasts, they're funding political parties, spin-off parties, events, all sorts of things. These are foreign actors with billions of pounds in capital, and they can just throw it wherever they want. And
they are throwing it.
And get the results.
They can and they are. Yeah.
They want specific results, and I think that's the important bit. Basil, we just got a short period left, but your thoughts on this?
Well, this, of course, goes back to Margaret Thatcher and the early days of privatisation, local councils being forced to issue tenders for rubbish collection. That was one of the first things. I mean, I can remember when rubbish collection was all organised entirely by the local council. Then suddenly we had private collectors contracting rubbish. This Palantir business is where that has led to directly, with absolutely everything now being subcontracted by government departments to private companies. And in this case now, a private company heavily invested in AI, in digitization, and what's more, operating across, as we see, so many different government departments. I think it's absolutely abysmal. I think it's anti-democratic. I also think it's wasteful because Palantir suck money out of the public's pockets for their own benefit, for their own profits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just after, we're coming up to the UK column ads, but afterwards we're going to be looking deeper into what's happening in UK politics, and more of these things will come to the surface. Amongst other things, we're going to be listening to Liz Truss speaking. But first of all, as always, a huge thank you to everybody who's financially supporting the UK column. We can only do what we do with your financial support, and we're immensely grateful to all the people who've supported us over 20 years. This year is our 20th anniversary, as many people will know. So we're so grateful for everybody that's signed up as a paid member, monthly or annual basis, or you're making donations and or you're buying through the UK column shop. If you're listening in today and you're not a signed up member and you'd like to be part of the team by helping fund what we're doing, click the blue button there to support our work, and details will come up on screen. Anybody who is helping us at the moment, and we have some very generous people on board, thank you very, very much for your support. Now, I'd just like to bring up here an ad for a look out for another one of my Gutsy Women interviews. This is with a lady called Erin, who runs a YouTube channel called Far From Eden. And I have discussed with her feminism and the fact that we've now got an increasing number of women who are flagging up the dangers of feminism and how feminism as an agenda is destroying the lives of many women. So watch out for that one to be streamed shortly. Now, tonight at 7 p.m, we've got weekly banter, germ warfare with Germ and Charles and Mike Robinson, and that, as always, will be interested, so do tune in for that. We've also got tonight at 9 p.m. Davos 2025. The West finally admits the rules-based order was a lie, and that's part of the Kaljar's Silk and Steel podcast. So very apt title. I should be very interested to see what's actually said in that little discussion. Now, on the fun front, Andrew Bridgen has sat in the hot seat to be sketched by Jake under the 1,000 Words Part 1. And that'll be going out on Sunday at 7 p.m. Let's just have a little look at this clip as Andrew Bridgen sits in the chair in order to be sketched and ultimately presented with a picture. Can we just pop that one across, that video, please?
And you've got a hood over your head and someone's kicked you in the face and your nose is bleeding. Then you're put onto the floor of a helicopter. You hear the helicopter take off.
Right.
And then a few minutes later, the door opens, you haven't landed, and then you were thrown out of a helicopter that hasn't landed, and we were a long way from the cameras, and we thought we were having a confidential conversation. It was me telling Boris, confidentially, that we're definitely going to win the referendum tomorrow. and Boris's face. Eugenicist Malthusian. Yes. What have you got against Stanley?
So I'm sure that one's going to be very, very interesting. And rumour has it there'll be more of the UK column team who'll be sitting in that very same chair. So we'll see what happens. Now, let's get back into UK politics. And the key message of UK column is listen to what people are saying, listen to the words, listen to the language, listen to the plans, because this is how we really understand who is controlling the power-based system through politics and the civil service. Now, Telegraph podcast interviewed Liz Truss in the last day. I've just taken a couple of clips. Please listen to what this lady has to say.
But did that experience of trying to govern the country a certain way and realizing you couldn't, did that change your philosophy of government?
It radicalised it.
Right.
I was already of the view that the British state didn't work. And being a minister for 10 years, starting as a junior minister in education, I was constantly battling officialdom and also other people in the Conservative Party. And often it was difficult to distinguish between officialdom and other people in the Conservative Party to do the right thing. So I had huge fights over education policy, huge fights over the trade deals that I wanted to do, huge fights over environment policy. But I still believed that the system could be reformed with a few tweaks, and that the people more senior in the hierarchy than me were simply too weak or too wet to do what was needed. But when I got to the top, I realised the sheer force of the administrative state and the relatively powerless position the Prime Minister is in now in modern Britain.
I believe that Liz Truss has said some really, really important things there, because she's admitting she knew nothing when she was in the system, but when she got to the top, she started to understand what was really happening, the immense power of the state. And then the next thing we have to ask ourselves, who is controlling the state and that immense power? And clearly it's not politicians. This is where the funding that you've talked about, Pat, comes in, and the immense wealth of the corporates who are now fully embedded in the system of government itself. So a big shock for Liz Truss, but at least she's had the courage to actually admit that on camera. Now, I've got another clip, but before we show that, Basil, if I can just bring you in. I don't know whether you'd like to make any comment on the young lady's efforts.
Well, it reminded me of Yes Minister and its successor, Yes Prime Minister. She sounded like the blonde-haired version of Jim Hacker, totally unable to effect any change because of the monolithic civil service in that programme, of course, headed by Sir Humphrey. I mean, it could have been lifted straight out of that, couldn't it, gentlemen?
It could have been. She ended by saying the state doesn't work, and I think this is one of the areas where she still doesn't understand. The state does work, but it's not supposed to do what the democratic system and the
it's not working for us.
It's not working for the democratic system. It's working for its own ends. Let's have a look at part 2 of the UK column's take on Liz Truss.
Right.
So that did radicalise me, yes.
So if you as a reforming Prime Minister said you wanted to do something, what were the forces that prevented you from doing it?
So let's take the example of what actually happened, which is I put together a budget which I believed would reduce the deficit, increase the country's growth, put Britain on a better path. The counterfactual has been shown to have failed. You know, the debt is worse, growth levels are worse, unemployment's higher, even indicators like gilts are worse than they were in 2022. But what happened is when I put that forward, the Bank of England, which are unelected, the night before the mini budget, unbeknownst to me, announced the sale of £40 billion worth of government gilts. And then in the days afterwards, their failure to regulate the pensions industry led to a market crisis. they blamed me for it. And what I saw was the entire system backed them rather than me. Mm-hmm. And when I say system, I'm not just talking about the Treasury and the Office of Budget Responsibility, which is part of it. I'm talking about the senior voices in the media. I'm talking about the establishment overall. See, what I saw was so-called independent parts of government taking decisions that affect people's lives and being utterly unaccountable for them. And
I mean, her revelations, Brian, aren't unlike Dominic Cummings' revelations after he left Boris Johnson's cabinet. But Basil, what do you think about this? She's insinuating that the head of lettuce rotted because the fridge wasn't working properly. What did you glean from this?
Oh, I think the system works exactly as it's supposed to. Interesting, she pointed out that senior voices in the media help with the destruction of her premiership, because we're always supposed to believe that the media has no power or is independent. She does indicate that there seems to be a syndicate, effectively, an alliance, Bank of England, senior civil servants, other senior politicians and media, who put a straitjacket on what any elected official can do.
Absolutely. So there's a lot in her words. And this is why I say to the audience, so important that you do give whoever it is the opportunity to speak, to hear what they have to say, because these gems are coming out. The government, democratic, of course not. Now let's switch to Andy Burnham. And the reason that I'm going to bring him up on screen is that he's been involved recently with the Institute of Government as well. And what is his big topic? Well, aside from everything to do with mayors, we also found very quickly that he was involved with Innovation Zero. And I'm sure on Monday, Ben Rubin will be taking a little look at this. But why do I need to highlight this to the audience? Well, this organisation says its mission is to accelerate a just global transition to a low-carbon economy. We do this by connecting innovators, funders, policymakers and business leaders from across sectors and from all corners of the globe. So this is well away from elected government. We do. This is what we do. Let's have a listen to Mr. Burnham engaging with the Institute of Government.
Andy, to come to you, picking up on some of Rowena's points. Wes Streeting this morning sort of made the argument that particularly perhaps those on the left shouldn't argue that the state can't function or that there's something fundamentally wrong with the state. They should be sort of active agents in leading the state through that. I wanted to get your reflections on that, but also thinking particularly, clearly you know and understand the civil service and the structure of government for your time as a minister, but particularly working with the government system that we have as Mayor of Manchester. What's your reflection on how things might need to change?
Well, from my point of view, the state does need to change. We're moving quickly now to an all devolved England. We have a Mayor's Council that is becoming increasingly functional. Mayors asked for powers over taxi licensing. We have the Home Office abolishing police and crime commissioners and integrating them with mayoral combined authorities like I've had for almost a decade. And I think that's the right reform. If you then turn to growth, the growth mission specifically, the ongoing resistance of the Department for Education to devolve meaningfully post-16 education is a limitation on growth. It's not justified, I don't think, for departments still to be resisting devolution.
So it's devolution and more devolution and growth. Now, we've edited what he said. We haven't taken anything out of context. It's just to give you the breadth of what he talked about. But it's all about completely changing the structure of government, more power for the mayors and the city states. And it's going to happen. He's telling you it's going to happen. Never discussed on the floor of the House in any detail. But Andy Burnham, at least being honest, as he jerks around in the the high-tech digital age. That did make me smile slightly. But let's go on and listen to the second part of what he had to say, which we've edited into little clips to get more context to what he's actually talking about in the time available.
Devolution is the direction. Devolution is bringing growth, not just here, but in other city regions as well. So why are they allowed just to make us fight endlessly? You know, it's attritional. You know, we spend so much of our time making the case for devolution to the parts of the system that don't want it. And the answer, I'll finish on this point. See, for me, the word rewiring, you know, Rowena rightly asked for a definition. Rewiring relates to the flow of power, doesn't it? It relates to modernizing systems so that the flow of power is better and in the right direction. And I would say, you know, the unelected state Whitehall currently holds too much power. And indeed, in my experience of 16 years in Westminster, the whip system disempowers the elected state, because often MPs are required to rubber stamp the long-held departmental positions, and it's a brave minister that kind of unilaterally will go and try and change it. It can do, but it doesn't often happen. I personally believe the answer to this, to a more functional Britain, is a major reform of the elected state, Westminster, to mirror what's being done now in the local state out in the world that I'm in, which is about place-based, mission-oriented delivery, very much focused around growth.
So there you are. Andrew Burnham is actually telling the truth that don't worry about Westminster. The power is all going to be in the city-states with the mayors. He and his colleagues will have the power, including over the police, and there's going to be a complete restructuring. We'll talk about this whole affair and how it works more in UK Column Extra, but let's just remind our audience of the power of this mayor system and these super cities. The global parliament of mayors is a good place to go. And if you look at some of the media articles that they've put out over time, you get a lot out of it. So in defense of democracy, Europe needs an urban reset. Everything is going to be broken down and changed. We might be using an American city model, presumably with people in tents sleeping on the streets as Los Angeles. And we've got compassionate cities, apparently, as a complement to declining welfare provisions. So you can't feed yourself, but don't worry, the city will have a sign saying it's a compassionate city.
There'll be free coffee and biscuits.
Free coffee and biscuits. And here we've got Decide, recharge democracy and human rights in cities. And who's actually pushing this? Well, it's the European Union, EU Charter Explained. So this is about a major, major change in what we think is democracy and how it works. And I'm just going to bring up two very brief little clips here from Rodney Atkinson. Now, Rodney is very elderly, but he's been a campaigner over many, many years, warning about the dangers of the European Union and its organisation. Let's just listen to what he has to say.
And just as the domestic populations are attacked, marginalised, and their democratic systems undermined by corporatism at home, so that corporatism extends itself through big corporations and banks into aggression abroad. And in particular, the advance of NATO and the European Union towards the former Soviet bloc and the Russian border over the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. So you see a direct connection between domestic and international affairs, between domestic suppression of dissent in so-called democratic countries on the one hand, and the expansion of corporate internationalism and globalism on the other. Mm.
So, Pat, wonderful to see Rodney Atkinson still going, very, very astute man, and we can still see that astute brain working. Let's just look at this little 20-second clip where he mentions the European Union.
The European Union is the sort of classic corporatist, bureaucratic authoritarian, centralized system which is inimical to all democracy and the nation state which support democracy and loyalty to democratic institutions.
Well, there you are. And if you want to see more about Rodney Atkinson and his historic work, have a look at the Free Nations website. We'll just pop that up on screen. And this gentleman has done so much work over the years, and particularly in exposing what he describes as the resurgence of continental-style fascism, which I don't think is far from what we are seeing in 2026. Now, this is the point for the audience to remember, that all of these plans of the so-called rules-based international order are coming from unelected men and women planning what's clearly a dystopian future. And be under no illusions, it's here with the United Nations. It's here with Global Parliament of Mayors writing to the United Nations. And what are they actually calling for? The formalised participation of cities in international decision-making process. So forget Westminster. It's going to be the mayor of your local city that's not only going to be sorting your future out, but supposedly with his colleagues, the future of the country. It's just incredible.
Which will future be, Brian, the Corporation of Manchester, like the Corporation of London, like the Corporation of Plymouth.
Yes.
The corporatization of the city-state.
Absolutely.
That's where it's going, transnational in nature.
And of course, if you're going to have this type of control, you have to control every individual. You're going to need a police state that is beyond anything we can imagine at the moment.
And what does Britain need, Brian, but another police force, another layer of policing? Let's take a look at this, how the British FBI will work. Did you hear about this, folks? Well, yes, it's happening. The National Police Service, the British FBI, we're told it's going to target terrorism, fraud, organized crime. I thought that's what the National Crime Agency was supposed to be doing a few years ago, another new agency, but no, we need another new agency here. The British FBI, the MPS, will only operate in England, Wales, as policing is devolved in Scotland and Northern Ireland here. And here the NPS will bring together responsibilities of the National Crime Agency, counterterrorism policing, regional, city regional, organized crime units, national road policing, and will be in charge of providing professional standards and training requirements, purchasing new equipment, etc., kind of like the Department of Homeland Security in that sense in America, which is a giant gravy train now. But here's the bit at the end, Brian, I thought was the most interesting. Their job includes the overseeing of the nationwide rollout of the controversial facial recognition software, which we'll talk to Basil Valentine in a moment. But before we do that, watch this clip. This is Silke Carlo is bringing a case against the state on this very issue of facial recognition. Listen closely.
How could anyone not get a massive chill down the spine when they read Shabana Mahmood's comments this weekend that she envisages a panopticon? The structure was, the idea of a panopticon is that you could...
Bentham, right?
It's Bentham. Yeah. The idea of a self-policing prison through total surveillance as the model for Great Britain. And as part of that she envisages ramping up facial recognition up and down the country, 5 times as many facial recognition cameras up and down the country. Today, I was in the High Court challenging the Metropolitan Police's use of live facial recognition, which I think is expansive and not in accordance with the law. But this is really, it's an issue for the courts to consider, but ultimately it's an issue for Parliament.
Oh my goodness, are we going to get a debate on the floor of the House of Commons on this issue?
Highly unlikely. The policy's already set, Patrick. I mean, it's obvious and overwhelming now that the control of the political agenda in this country is through the corporates, and it has the power of the banks behind it because you need the money to run the system. So the idea there's any form of meaningful debate, I think, is well past.
Basil Valentine, I want to get your comment on this and last story of the program. But the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, I don't recall her having a background in constructing panopticons. If we're looking at her resume, what she did previously, what is this it's going on here? And why are we always presented with these heads of ministerial departments that bring in these sweeping changes, and then suddenly they're they're rotated out after the policy is put in place and given a peerage or a knighthood. What are your just general thoughts on this new police force, Basil, and this whole idea that we need to construct a panopticon in Britain?
Well, it wasn't in the Labour Party manifesto at the last general election, I can tell you that much. £140 million being invested. The claim is that it will save 6 million police hours, and that those hours will be redeployed to the streets. The AI technology, which is where the money is going to be deployed to rapidly analyze CCTV, mobile phone footage, and doorbell footage, detecting deep fakes, carrying out digital forensics, in order to speed up administration, such as form filling, redaction, and transcription. The claim is that the 43 regional police forces around the UK are no longer fit for purpose. And as we've been talking about, we need this centralized, digitized system. Now, on one or two of the smaller police forces have already been rolling out pilot schemes for this, and the UK's Home Office procurement agency, Blue Light Commercial, for viewers who didn't know, that's the body of the post office charged with subcontracting to private companies. And they've confirmed that the Israeli-based firm Coresight AI have been subcontracted by the subcontractor Digital Barriers to provide the artificial intelligence-powered facial recognition software. So we can look forward, when people chant at rallies, "We are all Palestinians," perhaps they know why now, because amongst the people listed as being on the board of Coresight is Major General Giora Eland, who is said to have given his name to the so-called General's Plan to isolate and starve northern Gaza in October 2024. That's who's going to be powering the AI facial recognition software. We can talk more about that after the break.
Road tested in Gaza, Brian, once again.
Yeah.
Deployed on your streets in Europe, in Britain. It's unbelievable.
You can say it's hidden in plain sight now, or it's emerging into the light. But it's becoming very, very clear that the population of UK as a whole is being disenfranchised from its own system of government. And that ultimately threatens everybody living in this country, no matter what colour you are, what religion, how long you've been here, because this is a malicious system unfolding. We must end today's news there. Basil, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me. Patrick, thank you. We will be back in a few minutes for UK Column Extra, if you're a UK Column member. So we look forward to seeing members then. But for the rest of our audience today, thank you very much for joining us. Think about joining up and taking out a membership with UK Column. Spread the word, warn your friends. Also have a relaxing weekend. We'll be back at 1 o'clock on Monday. See you then. Bye-bye.